next speaker is Tavish Kelly. He's the former chairman of the Pearl River Republican Party. He's a valedictorian in his class at 16 years old. He graduated from Mississippi State University with degrees in political science and mathematics. He is highly involved with Young Americans for Liberty, and he is the owner of Kelly Firearms, a gun retailer and manufacturer in Picayune, Mississippi.
Are these for us?
Yes.
Great. I gotta have a Marco Rubio moment, right?
Honestly, I intended that y'all would sit there, but I guess everybody was a little shy.
That's fine. I'll stand. Yeah, like John said, I'm a small business owner, a very small business owner from Picayune. A lot of you guys already know me. I'm running in this race because, like Ron, I agree that this country has gotten a lot of things wrong and we're headed in a bad direction. Government's growing, our reliance and dependence on government's growing, and there aren't a lot of people out there who seem to realize that. There are a lot of people out there like our current congressman and our former congressman who think that we should keep increasing the size of government, but in different directions in some cases. They think that more government here and more government there is going to solve some problems. I disagree. We've got too much government. You know, I really don't have to tell this to you guys. You are the Pine Belt Patriots. You know, Mark Twain said, patriotism is loyalty to country always, but loyalty to government when it deserves it. And I haven't seen government deserving of loyalty for as long as I can remember. I'm sure a lot of you guys can remember a lot farther back than I can, and you might come to the same conclusion. We need a change in DC, a big one, and I'm going to disagree with Ron. We do need someone who knows how Washington works. We just need someone who's going there for the right reason and who has the principle not to be changed when he gets to Washington. Probably the most powerful man in this country, it's not the president, it's the Speaker of the House. The House of Representatives controls the entire U.S. government via the power of the purse in the Constitution. The House of Representatives can shut down, as we saw last October, and September, October, it can shut down the entire government whenever it wants to. The Speaker is the one who has the control over this. We need to replace John Boehner as Speaker. And that is only going to happen if we get somebody from South Mississippi who goes up to DC and is a leader in the House, a leader for small government, and is able to recruit people to our cause, to the cause of balancing budgets, the cause of repealing bad laws like ones that let us indefinitely detain Americans in military facilities, target them with drone strikes without warrants or actual active combatant statuses, and spy on them unconstitutionally over the internet or other electronic means. You know, these are horrible infringements on our constitutional rights, and they've got to be gotten rid of. Most of the government at this point is unconstitutional, most of it. And that's why I'm not going to be afraid to go up there and advocate to shut most of it down. Most of it's got to go. If it's not in the Constitution, it does not get my stamp of approval. And you can be sure that when I go up there, I'm going to be voting no a lot, and I'm going to be lobbying every other person in the House to vote no a lot. The other major thing I'm going to do is form a coalition to get rid of John Boehner. 2 years ago, Justin Amash came very close to successfully doing this. They gathered a group of some 10 to 16 representatives, constitutional conservatives, who voted against John Boehner in the Speaker election. And they came about 6 votes away from achieving their goal of blocking him. If we can get a few more people in, like Justin Amash, like me, we can block that vote. We can demand a more conservative candidate from the Republican caucus. But it's going to take a groundswell of support from South Mississippi. It's going to take every one of us who care about these issues giving it 100%, 110% of our effort to spread the word, to let people know that 2 failed incumbents are not our only choices in this election, because that is what a lot of people think still. A lot of people think that we have a choice this year, the same one we had in 2010, Stephen Palazzo or Gene Taylor. And both of them, of course, are going to vote for John Boehner. They've as good as said so. Gene Taylor explicitly, Stephen Palazzo has received $5,000 from John Boehner's super PAC. So we know what they're going to do. And people are kind of resigned to that fact. They don't have to be, though, and we need to spread that message. We need to let them know that they do have a choice. they have a viable choice. That, for one, a lot of people are being scared into Stephen Palazzo's camp because they think that Gene Taylor is a big threat, but he's not. Statistically, he has no chance of winning. Two scenarios happen. Gene Taylor gets into the runoff, or he doesn't get into the runoff. Either way, he loses because he can't win a runoff. So we need people to vote their consciences, and we need people to know that there's somebody who matches their conscience. We need people to know that there's actually a candidate in this race who is passionate and determined and principled and uncompromising when it comes to our Constitution and our liberties. And I want you guys here, if you believe in those values as much as I do, to get out there and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your coworkers, tell them to take a look, tell them to take a yard sign, tell them to watch the debates we've already had, see where all the candidates stand. Because we do have a chance to change this, and it is possible to do so. Right now, the vote is split 4 ways. Now, Stephen Palazzo is in the lead, I'm not going to lie, but we can change that. Down here in the South, Chris McDaniel is very popular, and I want him to be my next senator. I think that's probably going to happen. But what a lot of people down here don't know is that Stephen Palazzo has been donating to Thad Cochran's campaign, $4,500 from his campaign committee and from his super PAC. That's the kind of thing that the public here, those people with Chris McDaniel yard signs in their yards and Stephen Palazzo yard signs next to those Chris McDaniel yard signs, they need to know that. They need to know that their money is going to Thad Cochran and Chris McDaniel at the same time, and they need to make a choice which one they're going to stick with. And when they decide to stick with Chris, which I think they're going to, because face it, nobody actually likes Thad Cochran. When they decide to stick with Chris, they're going to have to make a hard decision over who they're actually going to vote for in the primary. And if you've been the one to tell them that Palazzo's teaming up with Thad Cochran, I think you are probably also going to be the one to tell them that Tavish Kelly should be their choice. And I hope I can count on you to do that. But of course, I'll be here all evening so we can talk about that. And I've got tons of materials for you guys if you're interested in doing this, because I'd really love to have your help. I'm one guy, I can't do it alone. Now, I have some great volunteers, don't get me wrong, but they're all overworked as it is, and we need as much help as possible. So I hope you guys can join the team, join the fight, and we can win this. We really can. We just got to get on the ground, walking around neighborhoods, knocking on doors, businesses, putting up signs, and spreading the word. So I'll take some questions now about policies, about strategy, whatever.
Let me ask you the hardest question that I keep hearing. You're 24 years old. How do you think that affects your campaign? I mean, do you think that you are in a gap of experience because of your age?
No, I don't think I'm in a gap of experience. I think that the experience that counts for a politician, for somebody, and I'm not going to lie, I am a politician because I'm running in a race. I'm not a career politician because I've never held office yet, but I am a politician. And what counts for good politicians is principle. It's not wheeling and dealing. It's not cutting favors under the table or being bought by special interests, which admittedly a couple of the people in this race have a lot of experience in. And that's not the kind of experience we want, though. There's too much of that sort of experience in Washington. We need somebody who is principled, who has experience with the Constitution, experience on the ground here in Mississippi, in the real world. And I do. I've worked with a lot of you guys in the past. I've worked on the Ron Paul 2012 campaign. I'm not ashamed to admit it because he's a great guy and I'm proud to have worked for him. I've worked in the Republican Party here in Mississippi, and I'm the former chairman of the Pearl River County Republican Party, and I led the Pearl River County state delegation to the state convention in 2012. And I saw a lot of you guys there too, because I know you are also involved, and you're leaders within the Republican Party too. So you guys know, you have the same experience as I have, and you know that we have the experience and the knowledge. Any of us could go to DC and do a better job than 90% of the people there. Any of us, all right? You're how old are you?
I'm almost 40.
You could go there and do a better job than they could, and it wouldn't even be constitutional. But you could still do a much better job, all right? The founders thought that 25 years old was the cutoff for the House of Representatives, and that's all right. But you know what? I'm going to make that cutoff, which means that they thought I was experienced enough. And I think that once the public hears our messages, hears the platform, hears the language of liberty, the language of self-reliance, constitutional conservatism, they'll realize that we have the experience and that I have the experience to lead not just South Mississippi, but also constitutional conservatives in the entire Congress to retake this country. Anything else?
So I think we should ask Tavish some hard questions.
You should.
So even if you would like to just be a devil's advocate, this will be excellent practice for him, defending his position. So.
And there are hard questions you guys could ask. I can't think of any right now, but I'm sure there are some.
So I think you stand a little on the libertarian side
Yeah.
of Republicans, but you do identify as a Republican.
I do.
I think the main thing that we always come back across in being on the liberty side of that is, the one that we argue and we talk and we hash out, private programs can take care of these social needs of poor people. It always comes back to the children. You
Right.
can take money from an adult that's lazy, they're not working, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. A private program has that accountability. Can you speak to those gaps that would create? I mean, the reason these social programs are in place is because at some point they felt that society would have global degradation
Right.
by allowing people to be poor and for children to go hungry and people to be unclean. I mean, there is fallout of this, and they've used the greater good, or what is from the Constitution,
The general
welfare clause is where they say that. So what do you think about that? Can you defend that stance?
Right. Well, I want to use a quote first. The French economist Frédéric Bastiat in the mid-1800s faced a similar dilemma. And of course, back then, liberals, or what we would call liberals and progressives today, were called socialists. So I don't mean that in the Marxist sense. This is the pre-Marxist socialist philosophy, and it merely means somebody who thinks that the government should be involved in the welfare business. And what he said was that the socialists say that because we do not want the government taking care of the poor, that because we do not want the government feeding the hungry, that we do not want to take care of the poor or feed the hungry. But that's farthest from the truth. It's as ridiculous as saying that because we don't want the government growing our wheat, that we don't want to eat. And I think that sums up my position perfectly. I think government's actually very inefficient, and I think we've seen that economically throughout history. Government is the least efficient means to accomplish any goal, economically speaking. Now, sometimes there might be a moral imperative. That's up for discussion on different issues. National defense is one thing that the Constitution allows us to do through the government explicitly. And so I think that a lot of people would say that there's a moral imperative, even though probably the government planning of self-defense is probably less efficient than a decentralized self-defense would be. There might be a moral imperative to centralize it. I don't know, but the Constitution allows it, and so I can stick with that. But when it comes to welfare programs, the Constitution doesn't allow those. The Founding Fathers were very clear in that they didn't see any room for the redistribution of wealth by the federal government. It's not in Article 1, Section 8, and so it shouldn't happen. Now, as how we go about that, we've created a culture of dependence, like I said a little bit earlier, in this country. Welfare's been around for about, almost 100 years now, starting in the Progressive era. Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt a little bit, and then in big chunks when FDR came into power. So we've been relying on this for multiple generations. We've become soft, we've become accustomed to the government taking care of us when we ourselves let down our family and our community. I think that a gradual approach is best. The way I'd start is by transferring these responsibilities to the states rather than the federal government, which allows for both a soft landing and for the advantages of decentralizing the process. Because at that point you have 50 different, as has been said by many other people, laboratories to experiment with social policy, with how we should best take care of the poor. And I think that would allow for a very, very gentle easement into a time when we wouldn't need to redistribute wealth, when the charities would provide. Charity, private charity, has fallen by 60% since the war on poverty began. 60%. That's a big chunk, and I mean, that's a correlation, but I think we can infer some causation there, because as the war on poverty has gone on, taxes have increased, and so people have less to give to charity. My plan is not one that is meant to be implemented piecemeal. My plan for the economy is holistic. We have to cut back on regulation and taxation and welfare really all at once, and the economy will lead back. During the 20s, we had virtually no welfare, but we had 1.5% unemployment. 1.5%. By modern day metrics, that would be less than 1%. Because today, if you're unemployed, we only count you as unemployed if you're currently receiving unemployment benefits, which didn't even exist back then. So modern unemployment is nearly 20% by the metrics of the 1920s. If we could achieve that, that would be nothing short of a miracle in modern day economics. And they did it in the 20s without any government programs at all. So I think we can definitely get back to that if we ease up a little bit. The war on poverty, again, if you look at the poverty statistics, so not unemployment, but actual poverty statistics, who we consider to be impoverished. Before the war on poverty began, it was dropping with a steady slope over the years, and then the war on poverty began, and it flatlined immediately. This wasn't a delayed effect. Poverty immediately stagnated, and it's remained at the same level since the war on poverty began. And that was, of course, back in the Johnson administration, was when the war began in the explicit sense. Of course, FDR implemented some of the programs that later became known as that. But we haven't seen any evidence empirically that government helps the poor. We haven't seen it. And we also know that morally, it's wrong to take from one person and give to another. And we know that legally, it's unconstitutional to take from one person for the purpose of giving to another. So that's 3 different reasons why we really need to end the war on poverty, at least at the federal level. And I think that if we explain it in a calm, intellectual manner, backed up with data, statistics, reasoning, that the public will accept the argument, because we want the poor to be better off. We just don't agree that the liberals are going about it the right way.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Tough question. Okay, I was reading an article this week about the EPA Clean Air Act.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I probably already know what you're going to tell me, but do you think the government has any role in intervening in the, private businesses on how they manufacture cars? Like there's been a lot of regulation recently about the emissions and everything, and also it's going to increase the cost of electricity as the coal plants, which now produce 40% of our electricity, begin to close.
Yeah, well, and we've seen that in the Kemper plant here that they're building in Mississippi, because the costs for building that have skyrocketed because they're having to put in this clean coal technology that costs a lot more to construct than the standard coal technology. But no, I don't believe the government has any role in regulating how we build things or what can be sold on the market. That's why it's the free market. It's called that for a reason, because it's not supposed to be the enslaved market. And I do think that when it comes to air pollution, the law does have something to say on that. If you're polluting somebody's air over, say you have a factory next to somebody's house and you're pumping out smoke and smog and things like that, well, I think they have a claim against you because you're polluting or littering literally on their property. So you do have a right to maintain your home in the manner that it existed before this pollution took place. That's not a federal policy. That's not something the federal government should be dealing with. That's something we should be handling through civil lawsuits in courts locally and on the state level. And I totally support that sort of thing being done, because I'm not, I'm a firm believer in property rights. And I think that if you are pumping smoke into somebody's house, that's a problem. And I know there's actually been cases where the government has decided opposite, oddly enough, even given the regulations we have. There was a famous cement plant in New York, for example, that was throwing out a bunch of cement dust, and it was causing all these asthma problems and stuff in a nearby housing complex, and they sued. And what the government said, what the court of New York said, was instead of an injunction against throwing cement dust into your lungs, they're just going to give you a flat payment and then be able to continue throwing cement dust into your lungs. And so we've actually seen, because of the regulations that we have in place, the courts don't feel the need to take as firm of a property rights stance as they should when it comes to pollution cases. If we get rid of these fallback regulations that the EPA and all the different environment, not just the EPA, but also with certain OSHA regulations, things like this, we get rid of these regulations that are considered necessary, really, the courts are going to see the incentive and the imperative, really, to take up the slack. And they're going to have to do that through property rights, because that's all that courts have in the common law, is property rights. And that's the just way of going about it and the constitutional way of going about it. So I want to return to that regime, which is what we had before the regulatory era began.
What is your policies on small business, trying to start small businesses in Mississippi, trying to kind of incentivize small business growth?
Well, as a federal congressman, I can't create Mississippi-specific policies. That would be unconstitutional for me to say, I want to make an incentive for businesses to move just to Mississippi and not to Texas or Florida. However, we can incentivize business growth everywhere.
That's what.
And the best way to do that, of course, is lowering the corporate tax. It's the best way to do it. The corporate tax in the U.S. is 39.5%, I believe. That's the top marginal tax rate for corporations. And that's the highest in the world. That is the highest corporate tax rate in the world, which means we are the least business-friendly country in the world. And that's why you don't see investment in the U.S. That's why you see all the steel mills closed. I mean, aside from the labor regulations, the NLRB has to go, the minimum wage has to go. These are anti-prosperity regulations. They actually hurt labor in the end. What they do is they privilege a select group of labor, the unions specifically, and then ununionized labor falls by the wayside as the union gain a monopoly within certain geographical territories, because that's what the National Labor Relations Board does, is it says this union has this territory and nobody else can operate in that territory. So that's got to go, because I don't believe in monopolies. But the corporate tax is far more important than any of these things. If we drop that corporate tax to half of what it is right now, we'll see an economic boom in this country. I want to get rid of it altogether. I want to put a flat tax in, which means I want to get rid of all income taxes at the federal level, except for the personal income tax. And that's going to be a flat 10% is the rate I want to put it at. I think that's a good rate. It's a nice round number. You might say it's arbitrary, but they're all arbitrary. So I want to get it really low, and we get it to there. We balance the budget at a 10% personal income tax rate. We get our spending under control, our deficit under control, because we've got to get that national debt down. That's killing us. We've got to balance the budget. We've got to get the corporate tax rate down. Until we do those things, people aren't going to invest here. Now, the deficit doesn't really prevent corporate investment, but it does prevent foreign banking investment, which is important to corporations, because foreign banks are less likely to invest in American corporations with that national debt being so high, because that undermines the stability of the United States dollar, and currency stability is very important in a modern economy. One way we can fix that, obviously, is to get rid of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the reason that the dollar is unstable here, and its printing of money has led to the wild inflation of the value of deflation of the value, but inflation of prices of the U.S. dollar. And that's why $1 in the 1910s is worth $100 today, because our currency's just decreased that much in value since then. That's why a bike that cost $10 in 1950 even is going to cost you $200, $300 today. It's simply the fact that our government doesn't really care about prosperity. What they care about are these statistics, that they can give some nice clean numbers and they can spin them in a way that sounds good. But really, the free market is the best manager of currencies, the free market is the best manager of corporations, and the free market is the best manager of prosperity. And we've got to get back to that on every level. So there are almost an infinite number of things that we can do to bring business back to this country. And it's almost hard to know where to start. but the two I want to start with are balancing the budget and lowering the corporate tax rate. So, and I do plan to propose balanced budget, by the way, so I'm not just going to say that. I will propose 2 balanced budgets each year that I'm in Congress. One balanced at current tax rates and one balanced at the flat 10% tax that I want. And so I will demonstrate that we can operate this country, we can run America on a balanced budget, and we can cut taxes at the same time.
Tavish, you had a conversation with Tom the other night that I was absolutely just, I was tired and want to go home. But what was your reasoning you were saying about that term limits are not necessary?
Yeah, term limits, it's more like they don't work. We've seen in the presidency, the presidency's had term limits since the Truman administration, and in my opinion, that has been a miserable failure. We've had Jimmy Carter, we've had Richard Nixon, we've had Lyndon Johnson, we've had Bill Clinton, we've had George Bush 1 and 2, neither of which have been successful. Look at the debt burgeoning under even Republicans under this regime. And of course, we have Barack Obama. I don't think you can show me one time in which the term limit has actually helped this country for the presidency. There's not one 2-term president being forced out that has fixed this country. Not one. The debt has gone up with each president. Spending has gone up with each president. Poverty has stagnated with each president. There's just simply not a metric you can show me to convince me that the term limit has helped this country in any way. What's more, it's hard to pass. It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment to the Constitution. How many people does it take to unelect a bad politician? 50% plus 1. How are you going to get to 3/4 if you can't get to 50%? If you can pass term limits, you can get rid of everybody. Term limits are a red herring for conservatives because they're very appealing. They say to us, oh, if we pass this law, all we have to do is wait, and the bad politicians will be out of here. But how much damage will they do in the meantime? Can you guarantee that they'll be replaced with a good politician? You still need 50% plus 1 after they get out, after all. Because you know that when that term limit's up, there's going to be people lining up at the door to get in. And unless you've got 50% plus 1 behind your guy, behind the constitutional guy, you're not getting in anyway. So that term limit didn't help you at all. All it did was give you a fresh face for another 12 years. It's a distraction. That's what it is. It's a distraction. They want to distract us with a constitutional amendment, which is always a lengthy process. It'll take up all the news. It'll take up all the political capital in this country. Conservatives will be so busy trying to pass term limits, they won't pay attention to the debt. They won't pay attention to our veterans dying. They won't pay attention to spending going crazy, to regulation going crazy. They'll even stop paying attention to Obamacare if we start focusing on the term limit amendment. We can't lose focus on what conservatism is about. We have to get this country down to size, and we have to do it in the fastest way possible, or we will crash and burn. And I don't want to be distracted by anything else at the moment. Do I think politicians should be in office for their entire lives? Depends on whether they're good or not. If they're bad, then get 50% plus 1 and vote them out. Because if you can't get that, then you can't get 75%. And if they're good, keep them in. There's nothing wrong with a good politician, because they're good. So I'm not sure you can give me a convincing argument for why term limits are going to save this country, because they simply aren't. We're going to die fighting over term limits.
Well, what's the alternative?
The alternative is 50% plus 1. That's the alternative. Term limits is when you advocate for term limits, what you are advocating for is a fight to 75%. When you advocate what I'm advocating, it's a fight to 50% plus 1. Which one's easier to get to? Which one's going to save this country faster? I think my way will.
I kind of think that it makes the electorate lazier because it's like a security blanket or this sense of security. Oh, we got term limits now, and I don't have to.
That's what I'm saying. They'll just wait.
Yeah.
Rather than actually mustering up the 50% plus 1 to vote someone out of office, let's say, no, let's just wait a few years. He'll get kicked out, and we can put our guy in. What they don't realize is that in the meantime, some other dictator is going to be building up, amassing his funds, amassing his political organization, and as soon as that guy gets kicked out of office by the term limit, up comes Hillary Clinton. That's what's going to happen. Because Hillary Clinton's what's happening in 2016, guys, and term limits can't do anything to stop it. But you know what can? 50% plus one. That can stop Hillary Clinton. Term limits can't. Which one sounds like a more conservative proposal? That's my answer to that.
Any more questions?
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I don't think that we're ever gonna get anybody on our side unless we like figure out some kind of way to like get the nation out of, you know, so much national debt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like, how are we gonna get the people in Washington convinced that all these people that we're suggesting on our side is right when we got high national debt?
Well, that's one.
More importantly, how are you ever gonna make any money? 'Cause
Yeah.
you're.
Well, no,
you're
a
already-
lot of people feel that way, and you might be right. It might be that this nation is going to go bankrupt, and we're going to have an economic collapse, and that's going to be what wakes up people. I'm campaigning on the belief that we can turn it around. I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, but I am assuming that there are enough people out here who care about this country to wake up now and do something about it, so that we don't have to wait for that collapse. But you might be right. I hope you're not, because if you are right, we're in for a lot of pain. So I'm going to do my best to prove you wrong and turn this country around. But it's a great question.
So Mississippi is such a poor state and we get so many federal dollars. How are you gonna expect people to do without those federal dollars and still be okay?
It's going to be hard. It's a very tough issue. It's going to be hard. There's pain when it comes to scaling back pork barrel spending. That's what, Mississippi politicians for the longest time have taken pride in how much pork they can bring back to Mississippi. It's not constitutional though. I can't do it as much as I feel for the poor people of Mississippi. And I grew up here. I grew up on the Gulf Coast. I know maybe a few people who make more than $20,000-$30,000 a year. I mean, the national average is what, 45,000 about? Mississippi's average. Mississippi, you're doing well if you make half the national average in Mississippi. But what we have shown in Mississippi is that we can get by on less. And we've shown that Mississippians have a strong sense of community and a strong sense of helping out their neighbors. That's why we're the hospitality state. Because we've had to do without for so long that we know that there are ways to get along without being the rich guy, without people from New York and California us money every month. It's going to be hard, but as the economy improves, Mississippi will improve. As jobs improve, Mississippi will improve. We get that corporate tax rate down, and you know where people are going to be moving into? It's not California or New York. People are going to move into the southern states. That's what's happening right now. Mississippi, we're poor, but we're in, I believe, the top 15 in economic growth in the country right now, and we're on the upswing. And pork barrel spending has, a Harvard study has shown that pork barrel spending, government spending in poor states, actually hurts the economy in those states. That's one of the most liberal universities in the country, and their numbers speak out against pork barrel spending to buoy the economies of poor states. It doesn't work. It's a Band-Aid and a bad one at that, really. Like I said, it's inefficient. Government spending is inefficient. We need to get that money into the hands of entrepreneurs, which means not taxing it from them in the first place. We get that money back in the hands of the hardworking people who earned it in the first place, and they're going to want to invest that somewhere because, if you got to invest money to make money. They want to profit off of their money. They want to profit off of what they have. And in order to do that, they're going to look for places to invest it. They're going to look for opportunity, and opportunity is here. Mississippi is one of the opportunity states in this country right now. New York and California are not. Businesses are fleeing those states because of their high taxes, because of their regulations, because of their general unfriendly business atmosphere. And they're coming to places like Mississippi. Now, Mississippi's not the most business friendly. That has to go to Texas, which of course is right now the #1 economy in this nation. Mississippi, this is I can't do this as congressman, but I can tell Phil Bryant and I can tell the Mississippi legislature to do this. Look at Texas. Look at what they've done. Their policies, no income tax, no corporate tax. They're doing great. People are moving into Texas. They're, gun manufacturers. I'm a gun business guy. Gun manufacturers from all over the country are moving into Texas because of how friendly they are. And that's big business. We need to get some of those guys in here. But it's not going to happen if Texas is still preferable to Mississippi. So, that's why decentralizing is great, because we can look to other states and we can look to how they're succeeding and we can emulate that. We can steal their ideas. And maybe we can improve on their ideas and we can get ahead of Texas. So that's my recommendation. We've got to cut the spending. We don't have that choice, because either we cut the spending when we balance the budget, or we cut the spending when the entire nation goes broke. So, the real choice is between a balanced budget and no budget. Some might prefer the no budget because it will drive the message home real hard. But like I said, I want to prove that theory wrong. I want to prove that a balanced budget can work and get us back on track. Because if people think they're poor now, they can't even imagine what it's going to be like if this economy collapses. We've got to take care of that national debt. It's a threat to us in every way, existential threat, more so than the Soviet Union ever was during the Cold War. The national debt will kill us, because unlike the Soviet Union, there's no mutual assured self-destruction. We don't have a nuke to point at the national debt like we did at the Soviet Union. All we have is our good sense and reasoning, and we need to bring that to Washington. And if we don't, and we don't do it soon, we're headed to a bad place.
And frankly, it was the debt that destroyed the Soviet Union too.
It was, yeah, it was. It was government. It was socialism. Right? Socialism, the classic socialism, even that government needs to take care of our problems. That just leads to increased spending. In the Soviet Union, communism is the purest form of what we're doing here in the United States, which is taking money from one group, take it from those who have it and give it to those who need it. And of course, the government's the one who gets to determine who needs it. And they can never do that efficiently. Those inefficiencies build up over time, and everything falls apart. Everything. That's why you see China, which is still technically communist, but has a freer economy than the United States. In the U.S. it takes about a month to start a new business. In China, it takes 3 days. 3 days. Can we really call ourselves a free country if it's harder to start a business here than it is in communist China? I don't think so. We've gotten away from that freedom when we get back to it. That's why I'm running.
What would you cut from the federal budget?
A lot of things. Places we can scale back on are, one thing is returning a lot of the entitlements to the states. I would return every entitlement to the states. And by return it, what I mean is I would repeal the entitlements and defund the entitlements, and then I would tell the states that this money is going to remain in your state, and I hope you use it or let it remain in the hands of your people in the way that they think is best. And that's a big chunk. I'm not going to immediately cut Social Security because people have paid into that. And I think, Social Security was premised on the idea that you're signing a contract with the government. It's essentially a forced 401k. You're forced to invest in what is really a bad retirement program, and then you get a pittance back afterwards. I think we need to return all that money to people as soon as possible, and then get on with our lives. The sooner, we have $220 trillion in total debt, including the unfunded liabilities from Social Security and other investment and retirement programs like that. That's the real threat. The $17 trillion is like the tip of the iceberg, and the rest is underneath the water. That's the 200 trillion underneath the water. But we can cut down that 200 trillion by paying back Social Security now instead of later, because that means you pay it back before the inflation requires cost of living adjustments. And then you let people invest the money that they get back in the free market and actually make a real profit on it so that they can live comfortably in retirement. We need to do that as soon as possible. And it is possible to do that. That's something I think we can sell to the nation, is fixing Social Security, because it is going to go bankrupt in about 30 years. Even the most generous economists have predicted that Social Security has about 30 years before it goes kaput. So we got to fix it soon, because I'm 24. I will never see a dollar of Social Security money. A lot of you guys won't either. And even my parents' generation are going to see a significant reduction in what they should be getting based on their investment amount in Social Security. So I think we need to return that money as soon as possible. Once we do that, it's basically going to eliminate that $200 trillion of debt. Now that's a lot of spending that will be required to reduce that, but we'll have less debt than we did afterwards. It's not intuitive. It's counterintuitive, but economically it works out, and it will make us more prosperous in the long run and have a freer economy in the long run. We take care of that, and that'll cut down obviously on our yearly Social Security and Medicare spending, because those are the same thing basically in terms of where the money goes. We can basically through that eliminate Social Security and Medicare from the budget, because that money will have already been given back to the people. They'll have already been paid. So it's not like we're not paying them. They've already gotten their money. So that's not going to be part of the yearly budget, and that's about a third to 40% of our budget right now. It's that chunk. So that's gone, which actually balances the budget itself, but we can do better. So what do we slash? We slash unconstitutional departments from the government, right? How many departments did the government have when it began in 1788? Anyone know?
How many what?
Departments. He says 3.
Oh, I thought you said, I was thinking
Anyone know?
branches.
It was 4. It was 4. 4. It was War, State, Treasury, and Interior. How many do we need today? 3. The purpose of the Department of Interior was to explore the frontier. As far as I know, that's already been explored. So I think we can do away with the Department of Interior. We don't really need the U.S. Geological Survey anymore, actually, because we've surveyed. The states each have their own geological survey departments now. So we can get rid of everything except for Department of Defense, Treasury, and State. State we can cut down a lot on. State's got hundreds of thousands of employees, most of which are paper pushers at desks, not diplomats. It was supposed to be a department of diplomats, really not a big department either. It was supposed to be one diplomat and a small staff for each nation where they would be there, and then the Secretary of State, the chief diplomat, and a small staff for him or her. And that's what we can get back to with Secretary of State. I mean, diplomacy is not, we've turned it into the spy game, essentially, diplomacy. I think there is room for intelligence within the military, but I don't think the State Department is the one who needs to be engaging in the spying and the wiretapping and all this sort of thing. Because the State Department is supposed to be the Department of Peace to prevent us from using the Department of War. And I think we need to get back to that, because we definitely need to cut back on war, which is the next thing I would cut. I would bring back our troops from overseas. I'd reopen the American bases that were closed mostly during Clinton and Bush's administrations, and I'd put them in those bases, and I'd let them defend the United States instead of defending Spain and Germany and South Korea and Japan and every other country in the world except for China and North Korea and Russia. I think those are and Cuba. No, we got one in Cuba. I think just about every country in the world we've got troops in right now. They need to be in the United States, with the exception of the Navy, which I think it's fine for them to be guarding United States merchant ships as they go about the seas. That's fine. Every country's got ships in the sea protecting it. I don't have a problem with that. And that's not a huge burden on our budget anyway. What is a budget is operating all these overseas bases. It's cheaper to do it here. When Americans get paid and they're in America, they tend to spend their money in America rather than spending it in foreign markets. We're going to have less value bleeding out of our economy through that route. And eventually it'll mean that a lot of our troops are going to want to go on reserve status and get jobs doing other things in the economy, because they're going to be here in the United States. And we've got the largest military in the world right now. Statistics have shown, or a study has shown, that we could fight every country in the world simultaneously from the United States and defend our territory successfully. Every country in the world attacking us at once. That's conventional, of course. Nuclear warfare prevents this from ever happening. But we could maintain our conventional defenses. We could maintain our border defenses. and we could allow our soldiers to go to school, to get jobs, to live more fulfilling lives than I think they currently lead stationed in Afghanistan and other bases in dusty parts of the world. And we're gonna cut spending while we do it. So it's win-win-win in my opinion. You know, we improve our defenses by bringing our troops here. We cut spending, and we make veterans happier. So I think all those are important, and we do it all without hurting any of our veterans. We don't have to fire any of them in the process. We don't have to cut their benefits. We don't have to do anything like that. All we're doing is organizing our military in a more efficient manner. So it makes all the sense in the world to do so. Department of Education has to go, EPA has to go, USDA has to go, FDA has to go. You name it. FBI and CIA are unconstitutional. They got to go. There's no provision in the Constitution that allows for a Federal Bureau of Investigations. If they want to do that, they can hire the state bureaus. And actually, they used private police back in the 1800s to do federal investigations. I don't have a problem with that either. Private investigators. But the point is, there's not really supposed to be that many federal laws to investigate anyway. So they never needed a Federal Bureau of Investigation until they started passing all these regulations and laws at the federal level. So you get rid of those laws, and you're not going to need an FBI, so it won't be any big loss. Now, bureaucrats will be unhappy about this. A lot of bureaucrats will be unhappy about this, and I don't have many words to console them, unfortunately, because they should know what they were getting into. There's no excuse, if you're working in the United States government, there's no excuse for not knowing the United States Constitution and not knowing that your job is unconstitutional. So, just doing your job is not really an excuse to not read the Constitution and know whether or not the job you're doing is legitimate and ethical. But we cut all that, and we can balance it at the 10% rate that I want to get down to easily.
So would you cut spending or cut taxes first?
I would propose doing both at the same time. I propose both bills at once. I'm going to propose a lot of legislation. Not a lot of it's going to pass. If one passes and the other doesn't, it will incentivize the passage of the other. If you pass a tax cut, that really incentivizes passing a spending cut. So if you pass a spending cut, taxpayers are going to want that tax cut. So with this particular agenda, it doesn't matter the order that they're passed in, because one will lead to the other as long as we can get them passed at all. And again, to do that, we've got to get a more conservative Speaker of the House, because again, he controls that. The Speaker controls what gets to the floor of Congress. It's very, very, very important that everybody in the country, and especially in this district, understands that if we don't change the Speaker, we're not going to change anything. We could get the most, I could be Jesus himself, and if I couldn't get rid of John Boehner, there's not a thing I could do in Congress, because they could just shut me up. And they'll try to. But we can get that coalition together to kick John Boehner out. We can do it. And that's why it's important to win right now, to beat these flawed incumbents, and to really show DC that we're really sick of them. We want them to go away, and we want them to leave us here in our homes alone and get back to the business of protecting freedom, which is what this government was explicitly created to do. So, my throat is tired right now, so I'm going to stop taking questions, and we can relax for a little bit, and then I'll talk to you guys again. But thanks.
That's all I've got.